At exactly 12:17 a.m., Daniel woke up to shadows moving outside his home. By morning, he would discover something that would change everything, and it was all caught on camera. Daniel Hayes had always trusted silence. His home sat at the edge of a quiet HOA neighborhood, tucked behind trees and far from noise. That night, however, something felt different. A faint metallic sound echoed through the stillness, followed by low voices outside his property line. Half awake, Daniel checked his phone. The security app showed movement alerts, multiple zones triggered at once. His heart raced, but he didn't panic. Instead, he opened the live feed. What he saw made him sit up instantly. Figures were moving across his yard. Not one or two, several. They carried clipboards, flashlights, and equipment. It didn't look random. It looked organized. Daniel zoomed in. One of them placed a temporary sign near his fence. Another measured something along the driveway. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional, but why would anyone enter his property at midnight? Then it hit him. The HOA had been sending notices for weeks, warnings about violations he didn't agree with. He had ignored them, thinking they had no authority over his land. Now, they were here, but what they didn't realize was that every single move they made was being recorded in crystal clear detail, and by morning, Daniel knew he wouldn't just have questions. He would have answers, and those answers would expose something no one expected. Daniel didn't step outside. Not yet. Instead, he watched. Calm, focused, letting the cameras capture everything. Each angle revealed more detail. Reflective vests. Branded folders. Even faces clearly visible under the soft glow of portable lights. This wasn't random enforcement. It was a coordinated operation. One individual approached his side yard, placing another notice against the fence. Another walked toward his garage, taking photos. They moved with confidence, as if they believed they had every right to be there. Daniel recorded the footage directly to a backup drive. He wasn't just observing anymore, he was preserving evidence. Minutes passed, but it felt longer. Then something unexpected happened. A small utility truck pulled up near the entrance. Two more people stepped out and began marking areas along his driveway with chalk lines that crossed a line. Daniel leaned back, thinking carefully. If he walked out now, they might leave, and he would lose the chance to understand the full picture, so he stayed inside. Watching. Waiting, because the truth wasn't just in their presence, it was in their actions, and those actions were becoming clearer with every second. This wasn't about warnings, this was about taking control. Daniel tightened his grip on the phone. If they believed no one was watching, they were about to learn how wrong they were, and what he would uncover next would turn this quiet night into something unforgettable. By 12:46 a.m., the activity reached its peak. Daniel switched between camera angles, building a timeline in his mind. Entry point. Movement pattern. Equipment used. Every detail mattered. Then he noticed something that changed everything. One of the individuals walked toward a section of his fence and began removing a panel. Not breaking it, carefully unscrewing it. As if they planned to return, Daniel's expression hardened. This wasn't inspection. This was preparation. He rewound the footage, watching it again to be sure. Yes. They were creating access points. For what? His thoughts raced, but he stayed composed. He tagged the timestamp, saving multiple clips. Outside, the group continued their work. Unaware of how clearly they were being documented, then, just as suddenly as they arrived, they began to leave. Equipment packed. Signs placed. Chalk marks left behind like quiet evidence. By 1:03 a.m., the yard was empty again, silent. Still, as if nothing had happened, but Daniel knew better. He stepped outside for the first time, walking slowly across his property. The cool night air felt different now, charged with something unresolved. He looked at the sign they left behind. HOA notice, property violation under review. Daniel exhaled slowly. They thought they were in control, but they had made one critical mistake. They had acted in the dark, not realizing they had stepped directly into the light. And in the morning, everything would begin to change. Sunlight revealed what darkness tried to hide. Daniel stood at the edge of his driveway, examining every mark left behind. Chalk lines. Disturbed soil. The missing fence panel, it was real. Not a misunderstanding. Not a dream. He returned inside and reviewed the footage again, this time on a larger screen. Frame by frame, every action became undeniable. Faces. Tools. Intent. This wasn't just evidence, it was clarity. By mid-morning, Daniel contacted a legal advisor, sharing the recordings. The response came quickly. What you have here, they said, is something they won't be able to explain easily. Daniel nodded, even though they couldn't see him, because he understood now. This wasn't about a simple HOA dispute, it was about boundaries, legal, personal, and ethical. Later that day, a notice arrived at his door. Official. Formal. Demanding compliance. Daniel read it once, then placed it beside his laptop. He didn't need to respond immediately, because for the first time, he wasn't reacting, he was prepared. The footage sat ready. The timeline complete, and soon, the people who walked onto his property in the middle of the night would have to answer for every step they took. But what would happen when they realized the truth? That question lingered, and the answer was closer than anyone expected. The meeting was scheduled within days. Daniel arrived calm, carrying nothing but a folder and a quiet confidence. Across the table sat the HOA board, their expressions measured but uncertain. They began with formal language. Policies. Complaints. Authority. Daniel listened patiently, then, without raising his voice, he placed a small device on the table and pressed play. The room changed instantly, footage filled the screen. Midnight. Movement. Faces. Actions. Every moment clear, the board members shifted in their seats. One leaned forward. Another looked away. There was no denying it, the narrative they had built began to unravel in real time. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. Because the truth was speaking for him. When the video ended, silence followed, not the kind of silence that waits for a response, the kind that already knows the outcome. Finally, one member spoke, asking how this could be resolved. Daniel's answer was simple: respect the boundaries. Remove the notices. Restore what was altered. Fair. Clear. Final. The board exchanged looks, because they understood something now that they hadn't before. This situation was no longer under their control, and the next move they made would define everything that came after. Within days, changes began. The notices disappeared. The chalk lines faded. The fence panel was restored, but more importantly, the tone shifted. Communication replaced assumptions. Transparency replaced quiet actions. Daniel watched it all unfold, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. He hadn't set out to create conflict. He had simply refused to ignore something that didn't feel right. The footage remained stored, untouched but powerful. A reminder, not just for the HOA, but for him, because it proved something simple. When truth is documented, it becomes undeniable. Neighbors began to notice the change as well. Conversations started. Questions were asked, and slowly, the sense of control that once defined the situation was replaced by something more balanced. Daniel stood on his porch one evening, looking out at the same quiet space he had always valued. It felt different now, not because the land had changed, but because the understanding around it had. And in that quiet moment, one thought stayed with him: sometimes, the most powerful response is simply letting the truth be seen. But the story wasn't over yet, because one final realization still remained, and it would bring everything together. The night it happened, Daniel thought it was about intrusion. By the end, he realized it was about something much deeper: control, assumption, and the quiet strength of standing firm. The HOA never admitted fault publicly. They didn't need to. Their actions spoke louder than any statement could. The midnight activity stopped completely, policies were reviewed, boundaries respected, and the community changed in ways no one expected. Daniel returned to his routine, but with a different perspective. He knew now that even the quietest places could face unexpected challenges, but he also knew something else: when you stay calm, gather the truth, and act with clarity, you don't just solve the problem, you change the outcome entirely. He looked once more at the cameras installed around his home, not as protection, but as proof of awareness, because sometimes, the difference between losing control and keeping it is simply being ready when it matters most. And that night, when everything could have gone unnoticed, became the reason everything was set right, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.